So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to CARN DUM, which is a map I think I've only shown once before, because it was added, not recently as such, but it was added within the last couple of patches, and I think it was taken from Divide and Conquer. I actually was initially going to show a 2v2 on the grassy plains today, but, well, it was a tournament game from the DF clan. I can't remember who it was that sent it to me, but it was one of the participants regardless, and I was a little bit concerned with the fact that it was a tournament game, to be honest, and I can still show it, but it is nearly 50,000 frames for a 2v2 on grassy plain, and I know exactly what to expect from a tournament game when it comes to that sort of thing. It's an experience. I'm not sure whether it would be an enjoyable watch, though, because it would end up being very grindy, very passive, and people would be not too eager to be aggressive. That tends to be how all the tournament games go, and it's one of the reasons why I almost certainly will never join a tournament. But CARN DUM, so someone new sent me this actually, the player who's playing as Erebor, which is XV Lasso VX. I'll just call them Lasso. So yeah, they're obviously playing as Erebor, and it's good to see, you know, other people sending me stuff. It's always nice to receive games from new people. You don't need to ask my permission to send me stuff, by the way. You can just send it right on over and I will take a look. But obviously CARN DUM is basically the archetypal layered settlement. You have the first layer, the second layer, and then the final layer. And this is honestly a map where the defenders often stand a pretty good chance. It's actually quite dark. Let me just turn the brightness up. We'll go to 45. Now, usually I have to turn the brightness down, but this time around I think we'll actually be okay with having it on sort of the normal settings. But yeah, as I was saying, this is actually a map where the defenders stand quite a good chance, because they can obviously put up archers on the second layer while the attackers are still trying to get through nasty choke points on the first layer. But we'll go through the attacking armies first of all, and we'll start off with Ranger's Apprentice, who is playing as Lothlorien, and here at the front he has got some Lothlorien axes and some Lothlorien blades, 2 units of each. Obviously very, very good. The line infantry of the elves is obviously much more expensive than the equivalents from other factions, but they're also much, much better. They do need to be careful though, because in this sort of situation attrition can really get to the elves. They often don't have the numbers to continue an assault for long, so Lothlorien is definitely going to have to deploy their resources wisely. They've got a catapult, got some Sindar Blade Masters as well, which is good to see, already covered in mud. Some Lothlorien blades back here as well. They've got some spears, which is unsurprising as well. The Lothlorien spears of course can form quite a nice front line. The elves are unlikely to do much in the way of mass pushes anyway, but they're still a nice thing to have in a siege battle when you're on the attack or defence. Some sword masters, and then back here we've got the archers of course, so some Lothlorien archers, some Maitha Ilazgelen, which are of course the javelins that are spear hybrids as well. Some staff masters, which are good melee tar pits. This is actually where the general is, so presumably they're putting the general in a sort of cheap unit so they can more freely use their elite units. And then we have some Sindar archers as well, which is of course one of the 2 elite archers. Lothlorien has the dual wielding variety. Interesting to not see the Galathrim nobles, just the Sindar archers today, so a decision was made there. The second army is going to be Froggy, playing as Arthur Dane. Got a couple of units here of Evandim's spearmen here at the front, obviously just basic militia spears. He might, and Lothlorien might also have some hidden units that I'm not quite seeing yet. We shall see, but the bulk of Froggy's army is over here, and we can see that he's got some Dunedain Peacekeepers pushing the ram, which is interesting enough. I mean, they're fairly expensive. They're not the sort of thing you want to waste as fodder on a ram, but still, they are doing so right now. Some Arthur Dane marksmen with their sort of breastplates, they've got the armour upgrade. Could be useful if they can get situated, although it's going to be difficult for them to get much in the way of kills. Another catapult, some dismounted Fornost Arrayed Knights. We've also got some Wardens of the North back here, of course, one of the few armour-piercing archers, which is where the general is. Very good in melee as well, so a good all-around unit there. Some more Peacekeepers, some more Evandim Spearmen as well, 2 units of them, and then 2 units of dismounted Knights of Numinos, obviously very, very powerful as well. Fairly balanced, although maybe a little bit more of a focus around trying to be a little bit more grindy with all the spears and with some of the archers here at the front, which is not too surprising. I'd expect to see some hidden Dunedain crop up here and there as well. And then finally obviously we have Lasso, who is playing as the Dwarves. He has got some Erebor Legionaries here at the front. He's also got his elite units on the siege towers at the front, which is interesting, so the attackers may very well be extremely aggressive here. Highborns of Erebor and the Obsidian Guard, we saw how strong the Obsidian Guard can be, and the Sons of Durin. Sons of Durin incidentally have got Gimli as one of their unit models. We've also got a catapult, a Dwarven catapult at that. We've got some Ironfoot Warriors, 2 units of with the armour upgrades. And then back here we got 2 Blacklock Engineers, which is fairly popular. Actually no, it's only 1 Blacklock Engineer and the Dragon Slayers of Erin 3. I do apologise, but you can bring 2, you go into the red limit, but the black blocks, if they get into a good position, could be the sort of thing to win this game for the attackers, we shall see. We've also got some standard iron-foot crossbows, iron-foot pikes, and some warriors and more axe guard down at the end. And as I was saying, Dane is going to be in the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, so a more elite-focused army from the Dwarves, certainly. And based on the resources they have, Arthur Dane and Lothlorien certainly have some hidden units. Now, as we go through the wedding cake-like settlement that is CARN DUM, we can see the Witch Realm of Angmar, played by Bop Tanta, and Umbar, played by Jinx Pro. So they've got some Abrazani Nadu Barweeb up on the walls, along with some Corsair Blackguards, so a good two-pronged attack there from survivable long-range archers, and then powerful close-range javelins. Some Belagaya Halberds, which will be a good unit to put on the front line against the Dwarves. They will lose to the equivalent Dwarven units, but their armour piercing will still be efficient. I've also got some Angmar Halberds, similar story there, only even more so. They are not exactly the finest halberds in terms of quality, but in terms of numbers, they could be just the sort of thing to get some nice value against the Dwarves. The Barrow Wights are one of the main tools that Angmar can use to make it difficult for attackers to get into a settlement quickly, and I would imagine they're going to make the Dwarves' life more difficult than it needs to be over here. Particularly seeing as the Númenórean Lancers and the Warlords are also parked over here, they could go charging out, although the Dwarves would actually be my least favoured target in this situation. If possible, I would have tried to go for Lothlorien, but the Dwarves have got those crossbows and a lot of pole arms available to them. Castamir's Legion and some crossbow Corsairs. It's worth saying as well that I did notice down near where the Avendim Spearmen are, there's a lot more blue on the radar, so there's certainly some hidden Dunedain over there. More Castamir's Legion, obviously very strong line infantry unit, Abrazani Nadu Barweeb, Númenórean Shield Guard, and some Barrow Wights over here. Some more Angmar Halberds, again from Bop Tanta, some Goblin Trackers, so just some cheap archers. Angmar in general, obviously not very archer focused, but still bringing them in this situation is necessary because of how you're defending. A couple of units of Halberds over here. They have spread their resources out, but then Lothlorien are a little bit far away, so they don't need to commit everything right away. Blackwatch Legion as well, they don't actually need to push, but they can do a very good job actually of holding in this situation, because no one's going to push their way through to Blackwatch Legion. And then up here we can see some Witch Realm Hammer Guard, some Witch Realm Pikemen as well, which again is not a surprising inclusion here. They're going to be pretty good in this sort of situation, with of course the Jet Black armour upgrades. Some Trolls of Gundabad. Looks like 2 units of Trolls of Gundabad. That's an interesting choice. It would have been more cost effective to go for a Troll of Gundabad and a Troll of Angmar rather than getting 2 of the same type, but still strong nonetheless. Then we can see some Witches. The Witches, some people love them, some people hate them, but they're here, so we'll see if we're going to see some more fiery death. We've got a catapult positioned very nicely up here on the hill, and then over here some Naru Na'aru Royal Guard, which is not the General's bodyguard, interestingly enough. An Umbar catapult as well, the Blackguard, which we just went through. Corsair Blackguards as well, so more javelins. The Naru Na'aru Sentinels, which are an extremely powerful pike unit. Lothlorien are here, but they didn't bring their Karos Galadhon's Guardians, so this will be the strongest pike unit on the field. And then some Harbingers of Castamere, and I think the final one of the final few units we'll see are over here. Some more Naru Na'aru Sentinels, so he did go over the red limit for them. And then another Naru Na'aru Royal Guard, so we went over the red limit for 2 units in addition to some Númenórean Shield Guard. But then they are outnumbered, so it's unlikely to be completely overpowered in favour of the defenders, because the attackers have got a lot of elites too. So let's see how this goes. I'm not sure whether I'm actually going to make a cut here, because I don't know whether the attackers are going to wait for Lothlorien, but if the match cuts out now, you'll know that I did make a little cut. Although no, it looks as though Jinx is going to be aggressive with his cavalry, and he's going to go after, in my opinion, the most dangerous of these targets, which is the Dwarves, because with all of those crossbows around, they're going to be able to zone out this cavalry quite nicely. Either Arthur Dane or Lothlorien would be an easier target to go after. I can see why you would perhaps want to thin out some of these elite units. If you can get a good charge on the Obsidian Guard, for instance, that robs the Dwarves of one of their strongest units. But it's going to be difficult, especially with Ironfoot pikes all around. If you get your Númenórean Lancers caught on them, it's going to be bad. They haven't actually sent their Warlords out of the settlement, which is interesting. 53,000 frames is a fairly long battle as well. But considering the nature of this settlement, it's unlikely that the attackers will just be able to swamp over the defenders anyway, so it doesn't surprise me too much. Ooh. Frame rate just creaking a little bit as the walls start to come down. So let's see here. I mean, 4 Nostradae Knights will be good, but all of these spears are I mean, they're a good choice because obviously the Umbar cavalry is going to be making a nuisance of itself throughout the fight. But I will also say that, you know, spears, when it comes down to brass tacks in the sharp end of the melee fight, unlikely to do the business against stuff like Castamir's Legion, even good spears like the Dunedain Peacekeepers. Meanwhile, I'm very surprised these Dunedain Peacekeepers are being used as cannon fodder. It's exactly the sort of thing that Evendom spears should be used for, really. Dunedain Peacekeepers are not the cheapest of units, and they're actually not bad in melee either. Spear Malice doesn't hit them as much because they have good skill. Whatever happened to that cavalry? They go off into the trees or something? Or am I just blind? Well, there are some Galathran riders, at the very least. Yeah, I suppose they must have gone into the trees. No, because the red line's there. Wait, what? Am I losing my mind? There were Númenórean Lancers from Umbar out in the field, weren't there? Well, regardless, I'm sure we'll see them pop up again, but the Galathran Riders will be making a case in point to try and skirmish them down, I would imagine. Horse Archers are a very interesting pick in a situation like this, I must say. Because unless you're sort of counting on the attackers sallying out, your Horse Archers would have to be used in a grindy situation, which generally speaking they're not fantastic at. Meanwhile, sending up this ram might prove to be a moot point indeed, because the Barrow Wights are shambling their way out of the main gate of CARN DUM, and they will engage the Dunedain Peacekeepers, in addition to all of these arrow towers also whittling them down, which would be the end of one of these units, which the attackers can't really afford too much of. The attackers have got some good quality throughout their armies, but even so, did the Númenórean Lancers retreat back inside? It's going to drive me mental. Well, there are the warlords. Did they all die? Are there corpses around? No. So they didn't charge into the dwarven pikes. Are there trees that they can hide in? No. This is the red line of the map, so this is confusing. The Dunedain Peacekeepers are now running away. So that has ultimately been a bust for Froggy and his Arthedain troops. But they're just sort of content to bombard the settlement for the time being. Even with additional holes, however, there are still only a limited number of ways that the attackers can come into the settlement. They can essentially open up the gate and 2 holes either side of the gate, giving them a total of 9 ways into the settlement, but they're all clustered fairly closely together. The Barrow Wights are getting into position now. This would actually probably be the best chance to use the Arthedain marksmen to their fullest effect. Try to whittle down those Barrow Wights in terms of health, because they're not going to be able to close the gap to the archers. The Barrow Wights are notoriously slow. And the longer this goes on, of course, the more likely it is that Lothlorien will get into position to make a nuisance of themselves. I'm really confused. Oh, hello. There they are. Why were they hidden over here? Well, they've revealed themselves again, regardless. After hiding in nothing, they are now going to make a beeline for Arthedain's army, which is definitely a much more readily available target than the dwarves, with all of those crossbows lurking. And I'm not sure, what has Arthedain got as a defence over here? Ooh, not the dismounted Knights of Annúminos. They're going to take a nasty frontal charge by the looks of things. They are taking arrows from the Wardens of the North, however, and the Wardens of the North will do pretty grievous damage to the Númenórean Lancers. I'm very surprised Froggy's committing his... I mean, fortunately for him, the Númenórean Lancers are breaking off, because a charge onto the Knights of Annúminos would do horrendous damage to them. It would be much more worth his time to send the Evendom Spears out there, because really, who cares if they die? And they've also got an anti-cavalry bonus, which the Knights of Annúminos do not. The dismounted variant, anyway. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? I mean, these Dunedain Peacekeepers are still in range of the arrow towers, so slowly but surely they are going to be losing unit models. The arrow tower's not hugely accurate, however, so that's not a massive issue for them at the moment. And the Barrow Wights are still just sort of here. In terms of attacking cavalry, they only have that unit of horse archers, really. Still, the bombardment continues, the dwarves also getting in on the action. They brought 2 rounds, interestingly enough. But yes, I would imagine that these walls are going to be taken down. But the real problem are going to be the walls on the second layer, because you can put some archers up on there and start shooting down into the first layer as the fighting is going on. And to be fair, Erebor and Arthedain both will probably be able to take a pretty savage beating from arrows at long range over a period of time, but Lothlorien probably don't have that same luxury. They're going to have to sort of try and get into melee and finish things as quickly as possible, which if they're up against Angmar's basic units, they should be able to manage. Meanwhile, these Galathran riders, in hot pursuit of the Númenórean Lancers, who've taken some substantial losses. At this point in time, actually, the Galathran riders would just straight up beat them in melee. But doubtless they probably want to just whittle them down further, make use of their ranged attack. I'm a little bit surprised he didn't send the Warlords out here as well. I mean, it is his General's bodyguard unit, but even so, the Warlords are going to be no use at all in the late game. If the defenders have managed to sort of structure their army correctly, it's going to be really very difficult for the Warlords to be used correctly. Galathran riders firing some missiles, doing a nice amount of damage there. Several of them fall, killing 6 in that volley. Not killing any in that volley, however, but even so, the Númenórean Lancers in full retreat basically have nothing to show for their efforts of running around out here, and I think they will just be hunted down like dogs by the Galathran riders at this point in time. Meanwhile, we can now see that Froggy is going to be moving his archers into position by the looks of things. He's got some Evan spearmen up here just as a sort of backstop to help his archers out. The archers are going to get into position and presumably start to focus down the Barrow Wights, which is a good idea. Getting the Barrow Wights out of the way deprives the defenders of one of their best tools for keeping the attackers in place over a long period of time. The Barrow Wights are fairly notorious for how good they are at doing such things, but now you can see the defending catapult is starting to bombard the area. A nice hit there, killing archers and spearmen. But even so, I don't think they'll mind this too much. That catapult would be far more devastating if it was to shoot the attackers, particularly Froggy's army, when he had blobbed up and was trying to move through this middle gate. As is, though, you'll probably be okay with the catapult attacking some of his troops that are in loose formation. And also it keeps the heat off of his allies. Froggy marching over some of his Evan spearmen, some Lorien archers over there. A lot of Lorien are now getting into position. Meanwhile, there is really no escape for the Númenórean Lancers. Eventually they will come to the end of the map over there. The red limit means they can't just bolt off into the hills, they will just be hunted down by these riders. Only 13 of them as well, so they've been savaged. The Galathran riders, of course, fantastic horse archers. I think they are the strongest single horse archer. I mean, the Chieftain's Vanguard are really tough as well, but I think the Galathran riders take it home in a contest between the two, purely because Elven archers have got that advantage of being more accurate, generally speaking better across the board. CARN, of course, can sort of offset that by being able to bring tons and tons of horse archers, however. The Númenórean Lancers have now stopped. This is going to be the end for them, unfortunately. There is no escape. They may as well just turn around and charge in and try and kill off a couple of these elves if they're able. Yeah, the Galathran riders, they know they've got the beating of these units now. They're just going to charge into melee, and the Elven skill will come out. The Númenórean Lancers, of course, have got no anti-cavalry bonus because of their Lancer status, and they will be destroyed. Strange, actually, the Galathran riders decided to pull out of that. They could have won. I mean, at this point in time, I think it doesn't really matter what the Númenórean Lancers do. But they may as well try and charge in, which they do, as this continues. Again, I'm not sure. I've never seen Ranger's Apprentice play before. It's possible he's just got a different name now, but this sort of, you may as well just charge him in. Like the Númenórean Lancers are going to stand no chance at all against the Galathran riders in a sustained fight. They did kill one of them, to be fair, but that was off the charge, which, you know, Lancers will be able to do damage to other cavalry off the charge, but it very quickly turns against them if it turns into a sustained fight. And yeah, this fight is only going in one direction here. The Dunedain Peacekeepers are sort of clustered over here into shield wall, but the Goblin trackers from all angles are focusing them down, and this poor unit of Peacekeepers has had to deal with the arrow towers and now with a savage sortilege of Goblin ammunition being just thrown at them. To be fair, they do stand their ground better than most. They've got a good shield value, but even so, this is Still a unit which is essentially going to die with no kills to its name if this keeps up. The Barrow Wights just forming a defensive screen in front there. And interestingly enough, this does mean the gate will remain closed. The ram is marooned behind them. Be interested to see how the elves handle their attack. They certainly don't have the manpower advantage to go for things in quite the same grindy fashion as Arthur Dane and Erebor do. As the arrows continue to fly in, the Arthur Dane marksman, pretty much the quintessential human archer. Their damage values are not overly impressive, but they're good and dependable. They're solid, especially with the armour upgrade. Gives Arthur Dane a nice skirmish line which can be used in all situations pretty much. These Barrow Wights are holding their ground, but this will whittle down their hit points, and when their hit points are gone, the Barrow Wights are not very scary at all. Their stats are not good. Well, we can see over here that Boptanta is actually sending his Barrow Wights outside the walls again, by the looks of things, to try and interrupt Lasso's Dwarven advance. Ironfoot Warriors coming forward. I think the Castamir's Legion would be able to beat the Ironfoot Warriors, but obviously the Dwarves with their infantry for the most part are still going to be a very strong part of the attackers here. But yeah, the Barrow Wights are coming out, and the crossbow Corsairs are actually firing their ammunition. Not exactly in a very efficient manner, but they are still killing plenty of these Ironfoot Warriors, which, if the attackers do run out of manpower here, it could turn ugly for them pretty quickly. Because both Angmar and Dunbar have got some strong units that they've got in reserve. The Ironfoot Warriors are now being accosted in melee by the shambling hordes of undead. The Barrow Wights. Very spooky. Ironfoot Warriors just quickly. Yeah. Okay, so the Numenorian Lancers probably routed off, or maybe they were killed to a man, but they are now gone. But this is the first sort of genuine engagement, I suppose, outside of just skirmishing, that we've had in the battle so far. The Barrow Wights marching out of the safety of their own walls to engage the Dwarves. They are actually surrounded, though, the Barrow Wights, so with how many Ironfoot Warriors there are, you know, this will probably go in the Dwarves' favour eventually. But even so, this is still a problem for the Dwarves, because even if they are victorious, this is making things a little bit more difficult for them than they would like. And then, just in behind the Barrow Wights, when the Ironfoot Warriors are nice and weak, there's a line of Belagaya Halberds, just waiting for their opportunity to start poking the Dwarves down. Of course, they have Blackguard, because he's some Castamir's Legion getting up onto the walls, but, you know, the siege towers have been halted in their advance. Castamir's Legion, the gate is closed behind the Barrow Wights, and actually the Ironfoot Warriors are retreating. They don't fancy their chances in this sort of fight, so they're going to back off and then come back. So this is actually the second time now that the attackers have pushed forward their siege equipment and been forced essentially to abandon it. And one of the Dwarven catapults has been destroyed. That's interesting. Not quite sure how that happened. Maybe it was the defending towers. Meanwhile, Froggy definitely taking the slow approach here, which is understandable, because he is actually coaxing the defenders into using a lot of their ammunition here on just his Arthur Dane marksman, which, if he was going to choose a target, it would be this. The catapult is coming in for more hits. Again, if it were me, I wouldn't mind this too much. Much better for the catapult to waste its ammunition now than later, when Froggy's army inevitably blobs up a little bit. It looks as though the Barrow Wights are now going to turn around and try and retreat, although the Barrow Wights are not quick, and if they get charged in the back, that's going to be fairly detrimental. You would still back them against the Evenden Spearmen, of course, but even so. It's a very organised attack so far. The Peacekeepers do charge in, but the Barrow Wights turn around. Lothlorien are making their move as well, over on the southward gate. Still the Barrow Wights having to take a lot of damage, and not a single one of them has died yet, but they have taken a lot of arrow fire, so this is going to pay dividends eventually. What is going on here? There is very, very little in the way of defences over here. It's possible that the defenders will think about just retreating back to the second layer. But even so, I mean, they need to do that across the board. They can't just retreat on one side, because otherwise what the elves can do then is just sort of wrap up the defending lines along the walls and deal with them one by one. And I'm very surprised actually that they're giving the elves this much leeway, because if any faction was here that would perform poorly, in a grind fight, you would imagine it to be the elves because of their lower manpower, particularly on the unit scaling we've got now, which is slightly lower than the max. But we'll see. The elves will still have to get into a grind eventually. And this obviously does have the effect that the Barrow Wights are essentially being left behind as a rear guard, which does mean they will eventually fall. How much they take with them is pretty heavily dependent on what they're fighting. Like, they shouldn't have too much of a problem against Abingdon Spearmen, for example, with their shorts. But the Arthedain Marksmen should be able to do some decent damage. The Dunedain Peacekeepers, they'd already taken tons of damage, to be fair, before they got into melee, but otherwise they would have been fairly decent. But yeah, you can see the defenders, I think, have come to the sort of decision that they are going to sort of abandon the first layer. They've made things slightly awkward for the attackers thus far, but they haven't really dealt huge blows to them. In many ways you could say the attackers are technically still doing quite well, because the Numenorean Lance of course died without really doing anything, and that's not a cheap unit to lose for nothing. And the defenders, of course, can afford less mistakes than the attackers, as always, in an outnumbered situation like this.
Our siege towers are at the walls. Our enemy have nowhere to hide now.
Ironfoot Warriors going to be entering the settlement. These guys need to get out of here. Crossbow Corsairs are not the sort of unit you want to leave behind, because they won't do too well. But they're out of here. As are the rest of the Umbar forces. They need to keep up the pace, however, otherwise they could be in a little bit of trouble. It might be worth their time to set up a defence here, and then get their archers onto these walls over here to start shooting downwards, rather than retreating all the way into the top layer. Or the middle layer, I should say. Top layer, of course, there's much less room to manoeuvre. There's also less in terms of walls and advantageous positions to take up. If you go back to the final layer, you're essentially hedging your bets on the 2 choke points holding. If they don't, then you will lose. But yeah, this is going to be a bit of a lull in proceedings, I feel. So this might be a good opportunity to make a little cut if the crossbow corsairs do not.
Our enemy have nowhere to hide now.
So yeah, all of the defenders are essentially retreating. So I will make a bit of a cut here. Actually, no, there is still a fight going on. These Angmar halberds are also the target of some of the archers. The archers don't have a great shot, but even so, any hits that do land will do good damage.
Now is the time for brave hearts and brave deeds.
If the fight does get overly grindy, the dwarves should be in a good position to deal with that. Now, these Barrow Wights, though, still evenly matched, although now the dismounted Knights of Anuminus are on the front line as well, so you would imagine that this is where the fight starts to turn heavily in Arthedain's favour. Now the dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights as well, and with all the damage they've already taken, you can see that the unit count is now falling. The Abingdon Spears, of course, still won't be great. I think there's also some Arthedain Marksmen that are out of ammunition in there as well. Just sheer numbers now doing the work for Arthedain. These archers threading the needle through the battlements, the spiky battlements of CARN DUM into the Angmar halberdiers. And they've taken a fair amount of damage. Arthedain still have their catapult, and they've only used it to knock a couple of holes in the walls. And at this point, the Angmar halberds wisely are going to retreat, because if they stand there, they're just going to keep taking damage. Lothlorien manoeuvring their entire army within the settlement, slowly but surely. You can see back there is Galathran nobles. So I'm just blind, as it turns out. Or actually, they can hide, can't they? So maybe I'm not blind. Sylvan Staff Masters as well. Good stuff. Lothlorien often tend to bring both of their elite archers, which is it's an expensive investment to make. Some Sindar Blade Masters over here as well, so Lothlorien giving Arthedain a little bit of support. Although at this point the Barrow Wights they're in a bad way. Sheer numbers are just going to be enough to overwhelm them here, I would say. Even so, the addition of the Sindar Blade Masters certainly won't hurt matters. It's actually a shame that this wall is right here, because this would be the ideal blob for the Angmar catapult to try and go after, as the dwarves start to position themselves within the settlement as well. The Blackwatch Legion are actually the first line here, and that's an interesting choice. Obviously the Blackwatch Legion far less likely to be the target of arrow fire, because it bounces off them like it doesn't really do any damage because of their huge shield value. Obviously they've got good armour as well. Meanwhile, this is a good Good spot here from the Goblin Trackers, attacking the Sindar Blade Masters. Sindar Blade Masters, even with the armour upgrade, do not have good armour values. They don't have multiple HP, and obviously they're a very worthwhile target to go after. And this could be an entire unit that Lothlorien are essentially going to throw away. You're just going to charge them up, Battle of the Somme style, right into the fire, which that surprises me honestly. Don't know what he's doing. He's very indecisive here. Yeah, he needed to retreat them back over here because Sindar Blade Masters, they drop like flies in the face of arrow fire, and now there's only 18 of them. And the Blackwatch Legion, they're actually not terrific in a sustained fight, but there are more than enough of them to deal with the Sindar Blade Masters. Indeed, they're shaken. They might rout here. Well, no, they should escape, but they need to get out of there. Meanwhile, the Barrow Wights with their backs to the walls, 106 of them. Defeat still seems certain. Right up against the gate, pinned there by spearmen and knights. Although now the gate is risen. The Sindar Blade Masters are there, but they took another volley in the back from the Goblin Trackers and are basically all dead, so a bit of a misplay there from Lothlorien. But it's not the end of the world. Again, the attackers can afford a few more mistakes than the defenders. But Lothlorien's army is starting to organise itself within the walls. Arthedain is going to be bringing up the rear here simply because he still has to get rid of these Barrow Wights that are in the way. Whereas the dwarves are already past that obstacle. Army's getting into loose. What have we here? Arthedain getting up onto the walls, although these lower walls, usually when you're the attackers and you take the walls, that's a sign that things are really going quite well for you, but with a sort of wedding cake settlement like this, it's a little bit less useful because it's very difficult to sort of shoot over the wall even still. Well, let's see what we have over here. The Barrow Wights are really being forced back at this point, back through the gate from the Arthedain army. One of these Evendim spearmen, as far as the eye can see, being backed up by some nicer units. There's also some Ironfoot warriors coming over here to lend a hand. Trying to just get these Barrow Wights out of the way. It's very clear that the attackers want to have all of their armies pushing at the same time, which is very wise. Again, a bit of indecision. The Ironfoot warriors arrived and then immediately turned around. I think maybe because they noticed those Goblin Trackers, but... well... the Ironfoot warriors will be significantly better at mitigating arrow damage than the Sindar Blade Masters were. That was primarily friendly fire. That other shot, however, wasn't. I suppose if these Barrow Wights are just a lost cause, you may as well try and shoot this this blob, because there are dismounted Knights of Illuminus in there, and killing some of them would definitely be worth it. Another hit. And this is the conundrum that Arthedain... oh, that was a nice hit as well. Threading the needle there right into the big blob. But this is just what Arthedain has to deal with. They were given probably the harshest approach, because right through the gate, obviously, is the next choke point they have to deal with. And they've got a catapult and a unit of Goblin Archers just waiting there. Goblin Trackers, I should say. The gate has closed again. Still more crispy. Orcs and men. Wait a minute, what's going on? Sounds like there's still Barrow Wights fighting somewhere. Oh, this is 3 men from the unit which is actually over here. How confusing. Well, regardless, the Barrow Wights have now been moved out of the way. The Goblin Tracker's going after the Wardens of the North, so I have to say that Boptanta so far he's been very observant. He's definitely gone after the right targets, because Goblin Trackers are certainly not anything special in terms of archers, but he's definitely picked the right targets with them so far. One thing I will say, however, is that the Blackwatch Legion are incredibly unlikely to be able to hold this line on their own for long. If he intends to hold this hill, he's going to need to send down some support, and the Angmar Halberds would be pretty ideal for that. He's also getting support from his ally, however. The Abrazani Nadubawi will start shooting in. They have the armour upgrades, they've got the additional chest plate, as well as the other chain armour. But Froggy definitely not showing any signs of slowing down, which does mean, of course, that the Dwarves and Lothlorien need to pick up the pace, because if Arthedain's army is routed from the field, that would be very bad for the attackers. They need everyone to pull their weight, and the Blackwatch Legion defeat seems certain. And this sort of showcases their weakness in sustained combat. They're really very, very good at pushing people out the way, as you know, both great shield units in the game currently are. Catapult getting more hits, but it's not exactly on high-profile targets. But this is actually a situation where they're not particularly fantastic. They need help, and you can see that their natural inclination is to push forwards into the enemy, which in this sort of situation is going to be no good, because more and more reinforcements are on the way. The Ironfoot Warriors are coming in, which is going to add, obviously, a more dedicated infantry unit to fighting them. Not great for the Blackwatch Legion. Says victory is a distinct possibility, but that's mainly because there's Evandim Spearmen here and Arthedain Marksmen. As soon as they start to take substantial losses, which they inevitably will, now that the dwarves are on the scene, things will go against them. What are they targeting? Ironfoot crossbows. The Ironfoot crossbows... I've always been a bit iffy about shooting crossbows with archers, because you need to really kill over half the unit of crossbows to really make a real impact. And the dwarven crossbows in particular should be able to stand up to goblin tracker arrows fairly easily. Just looking at the defensive position, however, it is going to be effectively decided in this middle layer, I think, how the attackers go about trying to defeat this sort of defensive position, because this is where a lot of the resources lie. This is a good start for the attackers, though. The Blackwatch Legion have been sort of bisected. There are still 52 of them remaining, but they're all scattered and all over the place, which means they will just be cut down. You can see them starting to bleed manpower pretty substantially at this point. Well, there is also Angmar Halberds coming down here, the unit that was under arrow fire, but it's a little bit too late. Their presence was needed earlier to back the Blackwatch Legion up. The phalanx would have been extremely helpful, and the armour piercing wouldn't have hurt either. But as is, possibly a bit too late. Still, could be worse. They still have a lot of resources that they can afford to commit to the fight. And the dwarves do as well, however. You can see now that they're actually preparing to move in on the other side, which is good. They need to pressure every angle, otherwise the defenders will just have the luxury of being able to filter units into individual choke points and slowly bleed the attackers of all their manpower. The Angmar Halberds down here, but once again it doesn't look as though this is going to go too well for them. With the Dwarven Vanguard and the assistance of all of these low tier Arthedain spears, the phalanx didn't really get down in time, and now the Halberds are in a lot of trouble. The Abrazani Nadubawi, but this is actually a good opportunity for the attackers if they can continue to move in. That catapult will not be able to retreat very quickly. Catapults take their sweet time getting out of the way. And Bot Tanta needs to stop sending in units individually. He needs to send in a good, solid force to defend this choke point if that's what he intends to do. Filtering in units one by one is hardly ever the answer to whatever situation it is you're facing. Unfortunately, it looks as though Umbar is going to help him out as well. So not only have we got Angmar Halberds, but we also have some Numenorian Shield Guard, which is exactly the sort of thing which needs to be committed, although I say that and then they stop. The Abrazani Nadubawi have been caught in melee. Defeat is a distinct possibility, which surprises me. I don't think the Evandim Spearmen will be able to defeat Abrazani Nadubawi in melee, particularly not with the support of these Halberdiers as they encroach on their space. They're also militia units, so it's unlikely that their morale will hold up too well. Lothlorien archers. That might go some way to explaining it, but you know, they're not exactly in the ideal position. They're having to sort of shoot their shots over the wall still. But still. Elven arrows would definitely explain why the Angmar Halberds have been doing so poorly. But credit to Froggy here. I mean, he's been given the most difficult looking attacking angle, and he's taken the bull by the horns and is really pushing forward. The Abrazani, they do make good makeshift infantry, but you definitely want to make sure they've used up all their ammo before you commit them. They need to commit forward more than one unit at a time here, otherwise this has the potential to go south for the defenders pretty quickly. I mean, they have a lot of resources up here, but they definitely need to keep their shape. If the attackers just flood in, all of the elites they have won't really help them too much. What's going on down here? You can see some Barrow-wights did pull back. Saving the Barrow-wights is going to be good because it's going to make the dwarves' job much more difficult. Very easy unit to use, just park in the way, and the dwarves will have to try and slowly but surely work their way through them. They've also got some archers over here and some halberds, Belagire halberds though, so slightly better than the Angmar variant, although with fewer per unit. Meanwhile, victory does seem certain now, but once again the dwarves are starting to get onto the front line. Only 30 of them remaining, but again this is not really the ideal formation for the Angmar halberds to be in. They're sort of pushing forwards into the attackers, and that's, you know, all polearm units, when you take the phalanx out of the equation, don't have the best stats. And Froggy's assault shows no sign of slowing down. More Evendom spearmen are moving forward, and the Fornoster Rain Knights, which if they manage to get into close quarters with the Angmar halberds, will dumpster them very quickly. Here comes the catapult though. What are they going after? Ah, the Arthedain catapult. Understandable. Although this Angmar catapult honestly might not last too much longer, because this unit of Angmar halberds is really all that stands between the catapult and the encroaching Arthedain army. Let's just see over here that Lothlorien has sent over some support. If we have a look over on this side as well, we can now see that there's some Dunedain Rangers from Froggy in addition to the Lothlorien forces, so some good high damage archers. But in this sort of situation, honestly, the Naruna Aru Royal Guard and the Goblin Trackers probably have the beating of them, because both of those units are good for very, very different reasons in a skirmish fight. One for being disposable, one for being very tough. Although, the Naruna Aru really need to be careful, because the Maitha Ilazgalan are right here. And javelins will throw a fly into the ointment, certainly. Depends on what they go for though. The temptation might be to shoot the Blackwatch Legion. You'd hope that they shoot quickly, otherwise they're going to be in a bad way. Now yes, they are going for the Naruna Aru Royal Guard. That's a good choice. You can see several of them fall immediately. Javelin's doing some nice damage, and the multiple HP won't save them from these armor-piercing missiles, particularly at point blank. This is a very odd sort of layout that the defenders have gone for, with their archers at the front. One of their elite archers, well, I know they brought two, but that doesn't mean to say they're disposable. Yeah, these Maitha Ilazgalan are gonna win this fight. It's a little bit unfortunate that the Dunedain Rangers were so quickly destroyed, but that's what happens when you put Rangers into the firing line. They're absolute garbage in a skirmish fight if they get focused down. And even the Lorien Archers, honestly, not great in that sort of situation either. The numbers certainly not helping matters. The Warlords are coming down here now, though. This is going to be... where are the spears? I mean, they don't have anything that's got a dedicated anti-cavalry bonus. The Warlords could prove to be a real problem here if they're... well... Jinx lost his bottle there. If he carried through on that charge and charged into the Lothlorien Blades, they would have been in a terrible situation. Lothlorien's entire army over here would have been in a really bad spot if the Warlords had followed through on that attack. Meanwhile, here, things are developing. The catapult is still technically operational, and now Númenórean Shield Guard are on the front lines at last. And now we can actually see that Angmar, Arthedain's forces are starting to break. So the halberds managing to hold on. Another unit was committed, of course, and the addition of the Númenórean Shield Guards certainly helped matters. So the defenders managing to hold. Fortunately enough for them, I would suggest. Although, once again, this catapult is moving in a very strange way. I don't know what Froggy hopes to accomplish here, but whatever it is, it won't work. He needs to send up some more troops, or he needs to hope that his allies attack soon. Because I think caution has... Froggy's been very aggressive, his allies have been very cautious. And that's always a bad mix. You need to all be singing from the same hymn sheet, as the saying goes. You either all need to be super aggressive, or you all need to be much more conservative. The elves are now moving forward, to give them their credit, and the Lothlorien axes. We saw how the Blackwatch Legion didn't do too well against Ironfoot Warriors and Evendom Spears. This fight is going to go in one direction. Very much so, because of all of these Lothlorien line infantry units. The Blackwatch Legion will not do too well. There are still some Naruna Aru Royal Guard in there, which, to be fair, they might... well, no, they're retreating. Every time I say something, it immediately becomes false. Regardless. I'm not sure how useful the Warlords had a good opportunity there to do some nice damage to Lothlorien. It's unfortunate that it wasn't taken, but perhaps fortunately for the attackers, because I mean, to be fair, Arthedain have sort of reorganised and they are now attacking once more. Very surprised that the catapult moved forward in such an aggressive fashion. Maybe it was out of ammunition all along. Catapult trying to do some more damage. Some Lothlorien spears here in reserve. More Arthedain forces moving up. Knights of Illuminus and dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights. Lothlorien archers. But yeah, I mean, the defenders should now be able to hold this gap for a decent amount of time with the Númenórean Shield Guard here on the front line. The catapult will be able to do good morale damage. The Erebor Legionaries are moving up to support, but it's not. The catapult won't really be able to hit this blob here without getting some substantial friendly fire as well, which certainly wouldn't be worth it for the defenders. Let's not forget that there's still the Umbar catapult as well, in addition to powerful units like the Harbingers and of course the Witchers, which are still going. You can always tell that the Witchers are going to be a factor in a battle at some point, but we're basically at the halfway point. So let's have a look at the percentage of kills, and the attackers are 10% behind the defenders, but as we have learned, the late game more often than not closes that in a little bit. But for the time being, the defenders should still be able to hold on to their advantage, especially if the attackers continue to be as indecisive as they are being. Like, this Lothlorien Spear unit can't just afford to just sit here. It needs to either take cover or commit itself. You need to choose. Arthedain marchmen moving up very depleted. Presumably they already routed and they're just coming back. And the Nadu Bawib. Catapult crew? Or is that, no, those are the Goblin Trackers. So are the Dwarves going to commit themselves? I mean, it looks like it, but again, it's only one unit. I think they want the Barrow Wights to come forward a little bit so that they can shoot them, maybe? I don't know, this is weird. Oftentimes, in a sort of siege, you expect both attackers and defenders to really commit to certain things, and so far, really neither side, except for Froggy, has really fully committed to something, which is odd. It's definitely a different sort of feel to this siege battle so far, but very unorthodox. We've got here Abrazani Nadu Bawib getting out of there. Some individual routing halberds as well. Now the Shield Guard may need a little bit of support because they're all on their own. Although the Harbingers of Castamere are coming down now, which, I mean, that's certainly some good support. Still some dismounted Knights of Illuminas on the front line. Saw those arrows hitting the dirt there. Not a good angle for the Nadu Bawib to be in. Shield Guard are also getting into position. And let's go and see how Lothlorien are doing. They should be making some real headway. They're not up here just yet, but they have got the Witchround Pikemen into position, Angmar. Yeah, and unsurprisingly at this point the Blackwatch Legion's starting to take some really hefty losses. And our Royal Guard are shooting point blank into the side of these elves. And now we've got some Lothlorien Blades over here. Another unit of Dunedain Rangers from Froggy. This is probably the one thing I would criticise Froggy for so far, the fact that he's put his Rangers right in the firing line. It's the sort of thing that Rangers in this situation could be exactly the sort of thing that you want to save to the late game, and they can win you the battle all on their own. But as it is, they've been offered up to the defenders really, and the defenders have obliged by shooting them dead. The Naruna Aru Royal Guard now no longer able to shoot point blank as they are now being accosted in melee by the onrushing elves. Looks like the Goblin Trackers are out of ammunition and just being committed forward. But they won't be able to reverse the fortunes of this high tier unit. They will of course just get absolutely slaughtered by any elven units that they encounter. Still the Trolls, which as a defensive tool they can be interesting to say the least. Arthedain meanwhile continuing to just push. And at this point he needs his allies to do the same. The Dwarves at Lothlorien need to commit, I think. Because Arthedain have thrown so much of their army into this that you would imagine that they don't really have too much more left to give. And as soon as Arthedain fall apart, of course, that means the onus will be put on Lothlorien and the Dwarves, and you really need to be attacking from as many angles at once as you can to divide the defenders' resources as much as possible. Arrow fire still being traded back and forth, the Angmar Catapult still doing its best. Another unit of Angmar Halberds being committed to the front line to hold Arthedain in place, and with the addition of the dismounted Knights of Illuminus and another unit of Fornoster Rain Knights, that's pretty understandable. These are not low-tier cheap units that they're having to fight anymore. They're just going to need to throw numbers in there and hope they can keep Arthedain at bay. With all of the resources the defenders are having to commit over here, I'm really very surprised that the dwarves are still being so passive in particular. They've laid out their army in a very neat and organised fashion, but they're not doing anything at the moment. Well, see over here a nice little fighting pit with a dead guy. We do have the dwarves actually advancing into the fight over here, but these Ironfoot warriors are going to need support. The Barrow Wights are going to be too strong individually for them. We saw how long the Barrow Wights lasted against overwhelming opposition before, and this opposition is far from overwhelming. The dwarves are going to try and sort of nudge in. They're going to need more support. Terrible Legionaries are a good unit. I don't know whether that'll be enough to give the dwarves victory, but we'll see. Well, pikemen. Here are the Goblin Trackers. So the elves still continuing to push. Okay. But obviously the Goblin Tracker's never going to last too long against Lothlorien spears. I find it amusing how when they got engaged they then decided that maybe we should retreat. No, but it's going to be too late now. The Goblin Trackers will of course be destroyed relatively easily. What's going on in the middle? Honestly, this middle fight may well decide an awful lot about how this fight is going to go. The Harbingers of Castamere are here on the front line, helping out all of the Númenórean shield guards and the Angmar halberdiers. On the other side of things, you can see the dwarves are also committing their own units up here. Unit of Ironfoot pikes there that you can see shuffling into position in the background, which will be a welcome addition to this middle assault. Right, well this could get nasty really quick. Oh no. Oh, you wouldn't, would you? This is going to be... Ooh. That's no good. This could be the end of Froggy's army. And this was when you see the witches on the field, there's always a danger that this is going to happen to you. Although, based on the officer, they may actually be retreating. They may feel as though their job has been done, and they're going to leave the damage to be done by the Corsair Blackguard, so the witches will still have ammunition later on. Good lord. Well, they actually didn't do a huge amount of damage, not a sort of match-ending amount of damage, but still. Crispy. Well, I'll give the Ironfoot warriors their due. I mean, they've taken a lot of damage doing this. The Barrow Wights have also taken damage, but they need some support real bad, because they are technically surrounded at this point. They pushed through and got themselves surrounded. So the Erebor Legionaries need to get in there and support them. Finish off the Barrow Wights, that would be something at the very least. But the Belagai Halberds are here, and they'll be pretty good at holding the line against the dwarves with that AP phalanx. What's going on over here? Evendon Spearmen, which are routing actually. Dunedain Troll Slayers, again, not too surprised to see them. They're another unit like the Rangers that can hide. Really, Arthedain's, aside from their lancers, their main armour-piercing tool.
The enemy are badly blooded. They have lost half their men.
I wonder who that would be. Possibly Angmar, based on the amount of Barrow Wights and Angmar Halberds they've lost, but they've still got a lot of their important units. Yeah, the Dunedain Troll Slayers are firing, but they don't really have the best angle. CARN DUM in general is a difficult map to get good angles on to shoot when you're the attackers, I'll admit, but even so I think the attackers have needed to do a better job of this so far. Meanwhile, Witcher's still loitering with intent. Defeat is a distinct possibility for the attackers over here, which actually does surprise me because... Okay, maybe it doesn't surprise me anymore. That was a very nice point-blank shot there by the Umbar catapult. I think the Angmar one vacated the premises. It did. Don't know how much ammunition that has left. But poor Froggy has been...
We must regain command of the castle lest we lose it.
Right. Anyway. Froggy's army is definitely looking haggard at this point in time. Here are the Galathran nobles, which unsurprisingly are the target of the Abrazanim Nadubawi. There are the Galathran riders still running around. I'm not sure whether they quite know what to do with themselves. Let's go and see what's happening over here. Do we have... Now we have the Erebor Legionaries moving in. Might be too late, however. The Ironfoot Warriors, again, this passivity that both Lothlorien and the Dwarves have shown. You know, they've been... I guess passive is the wrong word, because they have been attacking, but they've been a little bit too slow, I think. They could end up paying the ultimate price for that as the battle goes on. Castamir's Legion are being committed forward to the front line as well, which, relatively speaking, are on the same sort of tier as the Erebor Legionaries, so no rest for the wicked here on the Dwarven front. Let's go and see how the Elves are getting on. Again, a lot of Elven players, particularly if they're new to the game, will often try, very often try, to skirmish down their opponents into submission. And in this sort of situation, it just doesn't work. You don't have the right angles. And to be honest, Froggy is the one doing most of the damage over here. You know, the Elven player needs to commit eventually. And to be honest with you, this pike line is not the most well set up. There are gaps around it. And as soon as you start to surround a unit of pikes, it's going to be the end, especially with units as strong and as good as the Elves. But pretty soon, the initiative is going to be taken out of the attacker's hands if they're not careful. Because slowly but surely, Froggy's army is disintegrating. And it will only last for so much longer. To be fair, he probably will win this initial fight actually. The Harbingers of Castamir and the Dismounted Knights of Numinous going at it, and then with just various fodder around. But even if they do that, they would then move forward and immediately be accosted by more Shield Guard, Nadu Bawib and the Corsair Blackguards, and with the numbers that Umbar have here, that would be enough to finish them off. The Galatran Riders are coming up here. I think they should still have ammunition. Horse Archers have got a lot of ammo, and they've only really been used against the Numenorian Lancers outside the walls. Although the Corsair Blackguards immediately making a target of them, and they're dropping like flies now. I think it's fair to say that there is some new players to the game, at least relatively new, here in this battle. Meanwhile, the Dwarves' morale may prove to be a bit of a problem here. Barrow Wights, of course, cause fear. The Erebor Legionaries are unlikely to break, but the standard Ironfoot Warriors can be susceptible to that sort of thing after a point. Ironfoot Crossbows are down here. Again, the big problem I can see from the Dwarven player's perspective is over here. You know, if he needs to quickly reinforce either his own advance or Froggy's, he's too far away to do that. You know, these units down here are, at the moment, quite frankly, useless. You always need to have your units close enough to reinforce at the drop of a hat. If you don't, then your attack can crumble pretty quickly. Have a look at the percentages. I mean, to be fair, the attackers have pulled it back a lot. They have pulled it back a lot, but you also have to remember that the defenders also still have most of their elites intact. Now, a unit of Barrow Wights and really the Harbingers of Castamir are the only really high tier, well, I say ultra tier unit that has been committed so far. Interestingly enough, there's still some Naru Royal Guard down here. This is the second unit of them. Again, I have been levelling criticisms at the attackers, but I feel as though I should also do so for the defenders, because they've made some baffling choices throughout the course of this battle. Single filing, that, like in particular, you know, committing forward individual units into the attackers has been feeding them kills. You know, Bop Tanto was doing it in the middle earlier, and Jinx Pro has been doing it on this side with his Naru Raw Gun. These are not units that you can afford to just throw under the bus. And, you know, like I say, the defenders can afford much fewer mistakes in this sort of situation, so it's highly likely that the attackers will probably go on to win this at this point. Unless the Witchers can do significant damage, the Knights could also do some pretty substantial damage. The Castamir's Rangers are getting into position, but again, they're in front of the infantry. If the Lorien player notices these Rangers, he should immediately start shooting them. So that would be a very good catch for him. What's going on over here? Looks like, yeah, we do have some routing. The Dwarves losing their stomach for the fight. Not very many Barrow Wights left, but the Corsair Blackguards are up here. And so far, this Umbar defence has held pretty strong. But it's here in the middle where they may start to run out of steam. They've got some Corsair Blackguards. Here are more Dunedain Troll Slayers, who are doing the damage.
Our noble allies have lost
Oh,
the leader.
dear.
Without their general, they may lose heart and flee.
Well, Lothlorien came over with the support of a catapult, and the first thing he did with it was squash Froggy's general with friendly fire. And that's enough to rout dismounted knights of Anuminos and Fornos Lorraine knights. Oh no. I mean, the Wardens of the North are still on the front line, and they're certainly no slouches in melee. Very, very strong. But Froggy could well win this fight, but he won't really have anything then to push into the middle here with. So it's going to be down to his allies to try and pull this one out. There's still some nasty units to deal with as well. What on earth is this? What have you done?
Men are winning the battle. If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
I suppose it's technically possible that at this point in time the Castamir's Rangers have been firing at something and I simply didn't notice. But even so, why on earth would you commit them forwards all on their own? That's madness. They're just going to get destroyed by the elves. Even in melee they can be useful to sort of back up a line with some additional skill, but on their own they're going to do nothing. That's madness. And now you can see the elves, seeing the opportunity, they're just going to rush forward and they're going to crush the Castamir's Rangers underfoot, surely. And a phalanx is probably going to be set up, but I'm baffled. I mean, honestly, if the Rangers still had ammunition, that's a cardinal sin of the game. Like, that would be unforgivable to lose a unit of Rangers by committing them into melee with elven infantry. That's madness. Anyway, meanwhile over here the Umbar catapult. You can still see here the Wardens of the North fighting hard on the front line with their long swords. And just in behind them you can see the battle axes of the Troll Slayers have also been whipped out. Catapult rolling forward, trying to get another good shot. Although, to be honest with you, I mean, I suppose it would be worth your time to go after the catapult or the Troll Slayers. We shall see. What have we got here? Corsair Blackguard, some Shield Guard. And the Wardens of the North are going to just run past what remains of the Nadu Bawi and presumably try and get to the catapult in melee. Meanwhile, the dwarves have fully pulled back and are now being... They are now being passive. They are effectively doing nothing at this point in time. But the elves aren't. The elves, to their credit, are moving forward, although they are having to go through a lot of pikes, the Naru Aru Sentinels and the Witch Realm pikes, although again the defenders are making the mistake of not fully committing. You know, they're committing bits and pieces rather than committing everything, and by the time, you know, committing it now is too late. The damage has already been done. The elves have found their way through your line. You know, you need to layer up long before this sort of thing starts to happen. And the Angmar Halberds are not going to be able to get into their formation very easily, and the Lothlorien Blades are going to carve through them. Even the Naru Aru Sentinels, who are a fantastic pike unit, all of these units are really strong. Eventually, the shoddy construction of these lines is eventually going to tell, I think. Some Hammer Guard over here. I mean, to be fair, they do have the Witches and the Trolls heading on over, so we'll keep that in mind. But now I think Froggy and his valiant attempts to push up through the middle are finally going to be brought to an end. The Troll Slayers are having to take on... Well, every time I say something, the opposite becomes true. The Shield Guard are now pulling back. How infuriating. Meanwhile, where did the Witches go? The Hammer Guard are over here. Please tell me the Witches didn't get committed to melee of all things. Yep, they're in there. They're in melee with Troll Slayers. This is madness. The Halberds are actually doing pretty well. The numbers of them are doing well. And the Elves could be in a fairly decent amount of trouble here. If the Witches get over here, which it looks like they're going to do, they could lay waste to this Elven attack, and then with the Trolls and the Pikes and the Hammer Guard, they would probably have enough to destroy the Elven advance, which means it would be down entirely to the Dwarven player, and then he would have to move. Here goes the Witchers, and there we go. Just complete destruction of the Elven line. Ugh. And that's going to be a rout. Not easy to rout the Elves, but that is certainly one thing that will do it. That's actually wasted shots there, because those units were already routing off. And that will be the entirety of the Witcher's ammunition now, at that point. There goes the Elven lines. They do still have an army of sorts down here. Sindar Archers, Riders, Nobles. The strongest units are still alive, but in no great numbers at this point. This has been a match of a very strange behaviour, I must say. Meanwhile, Dunedain Troll Slayers fighting hard, and with the fact that the Númenórean Shield Guard pulled back, the Troll Slayers should be able to beat the Corsair Blackguards in melee. So Froggy's still kicking in this fight, just. Some arrow fire coming in down there as well, well, crossbow fire from the Ironfoot crossbow man. Still, the Dwarven army is infuriatingly static. His allies desperately need him to do something. Really, really desperately, because they don't have much left, and the onus is on you as an attacker to move forward. You can't expect the defenders to come and get you. That's not how it works. Dunedain Trollslayers trying to move forward, trying to do what they can. They might be able to get the catapult, but the Witch-Round Pikemen are now here, and they should be able to get their pikes down, and that might finally be the end of Froggy's valiant attempts in this battle to fight on. I must say, I like this map because it doesn't plaster the units in that ugly dirt texture, which seems to happen on every map that there's sand. Castamir's Legion as well, so Jinx still has some troops that he can afford to commit. And the Warlords are still a factor as well. The Warlords honestly now would be the time to use them, because you should just be able to wipe the Elves from the face of the battlefield with what's left of the with your cavalry. Here come the Dunedain Rangers. They rout before they even manage to get to the front lines. The Warlords charged something there. I don't quite know what, though. What on earth is going on over here? Well, there is a Troll Slayer trying to avenge the legions of elves that were just buried underneath that Witcher fire.
The battle is very much in our favour. If we remain true and steadfast, victory will be ours.
I mean, I suppose, based on the percentages, the Dwarven player still has so much of his army left that it is entirely possible that the attackers win this, although I'm not sure either team really deserves to win the battle. It's definitely been a strange one. We'll see what happens anyway. This one Troll Slayer is putting up a good fight with his axe. Well, there he goes. Run through by a Witcher. They don't do much of their killing in melee, but you know they're actually decent in melee. They're nowhere near as strong as the Nazgul, but they can be used in a similar sort of way, but you can certainly not expect them to last nearly as long or get nearly as many kills in melee. These Dunedain Troll Slayers over here, only 4 of them remain, the Castamir's Legion and the Witcher-Round Pikemen combining their powers to finally bring about the end of Arthedain on the field today. Finally, though, the dwarves are being roused to action. Crossbows, elite forces, coming forwards. We'll see whether the defenders have enough to withstand a dwarven advance. Considering the choke points, they might. I mean, they definitely have the tools to do it. They've got Witcher-Round Blackguard, they've got Hammer Guard, they've got Trolls. Obsidian Guard, like a lot of the Dwarven elite infantry though is strong. And the Elves do still have Sindar Archers and Galathran Nobles. Not going to be easy. The Warlords did go down there to do something. There's still some Lorien Archers as well. But I think this is the sum total of the Elven army at this point. Not huge, but it's still not the sort of thing which... Well, there's also the Staff Masters, the General's Bodyguard, but they don't get many kills. It's not the sort of thing, however, that the defenders can ignore. They do have to put up a defence over here. otherwise the Elven elites will go about their grisly work unopposed.
The battle is very much in our favour. If we remain true and steadfast, victory will be ours.
Well, the Dwarven player has sent forward a wave, 2 units I believe of Axe Guard of Erebor and the Obsidian Guard. In response, in addition to the Pikemen and Castamir's Legion that were already here, a unit of Trolls and the Witcher Hammer Guard are over here now, which honestly should be enough for the defenders to throw off this attack without support. The crossbows need to get into a good position to fire, and they need to do so quickly, I think, because these Axe Guard are not enjoying their treatment at the hands of these Angmar units at all. Some of the Trolls of Gundabad, they have very weird death animations. The unit models tend to collapse in on themselves. But the Trolls, they don't live all that long, but they can still do a lot of damage. Even against units like the Axe Guard, which would technically be very strong against them. Victory? That's interesting. I can't imagine that'll be the case when the Hammer Guard starts to get to swinging. The Obsidian Guard, we've seen how strong they can be. The addition of the pikes might complicate things here somewhat, though. What's going on over here? Looks like the dwarves are going to mount an assault on this side as well. Although the crossbows are right here. They are going to get some point-blank fire. They're actually going after the Ironfoot Warriors rather than the Erebor Legionaries. But it doesn't matter too much. You know, the Umbar should have enough to throw off these very depleted units on this side for the time being. Just keeping an eye on the percentage of kills. Yeah, I mean, once again, the defenders managed to stretch that a little bit after the Witchers grilled most of the Elven front line and after Froggy's army started to really fall apart. It is basically, you know, going to be down to the Dwarven player to do a lot of the damage here. The Axe Guard of Erebor trying to circumvent the Phalanx over here, which is a good move, but I'm not sure whether the Dwarves have got the manpower over here. But now you can see that Sons of Durin are moving forward. They've also got some Highborns of Erebor, so all of the elites are actually coming up here through the middle. Some Sentinels back there ready to be committed. The Catapult crew if things get really desperate, I suppose. But this is exactly the sort of unit which is going to be good against the Dwarves, the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. Obviously doing a lot of damage. There's only one Troll left alive, but the Axe Guard of Erebor over on this side were completely crushed. We'll see though, the Sons of Durin are basically an equivalent unit to the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, more or less. Oh no, no, please don't do this to me, defenders. Please just tell me you're reorganising and not retreating your pikes off the front line. It looks as though they are just sort of reorganising them, which, thank God. I thought they were actually just going to run away with their pikes, the one thing which is giving their line like a real anchor. Oh boy. They've also got the Blackguard. Honestly, it might not be a bad idea to send the Blackguard in over here. They should beat the Highborns of Erebor one-on-one. And the Highborns are now loose. All of these crossbow bolts are flying. They don't have the easiest shot, to be fair, but going after the Witch Realm Hammer Guard is still absolutely the right way to go. There's still another unit of Trolls which Angmar can commit. Looks as though there's a bit of a counter-attack going on here. This is what I was hoping to see earlier, to be honest with you.
Our men are winning the battle. If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
The Warlords are taking losses, though. Catapult hits. Bisecting the Elven forces there. Sindar Archers, Galathran Nobles and Staff Masters. This could work against the defenders, to be fair. I like this move by them. It's bold. But they need to get the Warlords in behind and start hammer and anvil charging them. Which it looks like that's what they're going to be doing. Although I say that, the Galathran Riders are right here.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
To be fair, you know, the Nairu and Aru Sentinels, you need to set your Phalanx up. If they were going to do this, they probably should have committed a few more men. The Trolls are coming down, but it'll probably be too late. There goes our Pharazon. Hitting the floor like a sack of spuds. And the Witch Realm Pikemen are moving forward here. It was an aggressive push with a lot of Phalanx units. And I like the idea of it, but again, the execution, as with a few things in this battle, if we're being honest, a little bit off. A little bit off. Still an interesting one, though. I'm glad that new players are playing it. Crossbow Corsairs up against a couple of Erebor Legions. Corsair Blackguards, I'm not sure. I think There's still a 6% difference. And here in the middle might be the... this, I think, is going to be the key engagement here. The Blackguard were committed forward against the Highborns of Erebor. Here come the Witch Arm Hammer Guard. I think the amount of Dwarven elites is probably what's going to be able to sort this out, and then of course there are the Elven ones to take into account as well. So I think the attackers are probably just about going to be able to pull this out. The Witch Arm Hammer Guard have also been in melee for a little while at this point, whereas the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin are fresh, and they also got the charge off. The Hammer Guard unable to get their own hefty charge bonus into the Dragon Slayers, which is unfortunate for them. Hammer blows just continuing to be rained down here. There is Dane. The death of the General might have an effect, although I'm not sure it would be too bad. And the Sons of Durin are there, obviously. Another unit of Dunedain Rangers. Froggy still lives, and this could be the final blow. If the Dunedain Rangers position themselves here, shoot right along the defending line, that could be the end. That body piercing could be the final nail in the coffin. I don't think the defenders have too much else that they can offer. Still some Ironfoot pikes in reserve, as well as the dwarf catapult, crossbows. At this point, the defenders need to send more resources over there, and they are. The Corsair Blackguards running over as quickly as they possibly can. Although the Dunedain Rangers are spotting them, and they're going to put an end to any possible reinforcements. Getting absolutely shredded, actually. The Blackguard's not the best at taking arrow fire, it must be said. But look how quickly the Dragon Slayers just crushed this Hammer Guard. Caught them unawares. Dane getting a nice kill there, caving in that Orc's chest. What's going on down here? Looks like the artillery has definitely had a big effect over here. The Trolls of Gundabad have also had a big effect. Looks like actually the defenders are going to win against the elves down here, but I'm not convinced that they'll win by a big enough margin to challenge what the dwarves have left anyway. Galathan Riders over here. There's some Ironfoot crossbows from the dwarves as well. These pikes are just sort of desperately trying to get to the catapult to stop it from shooting. Again, there's Angmar Halberds just in reserve over there, which confuses me. I don't understand what you're keeping them in reserve for. This is the kind of situation in the battle where it's all in now. It's now or never. You know, even if you lose this fight, the match is over. Having units in reserve is not going to give you anything. It's not going to give you any sort of backstop. Catapult crew. Not going to do too well against Naru and Aru Sentinels, even when they're sort of disorganised like this. But Lorien are probably going to lose this one, interestingly enough. Catapult crew, what happened to the Dunedain? Ah, there they are. They went back down there. But now, nice rear charge there by the Dragon Slayers. This is going to be the beginning of the end for the defensive lines now. Pikes are what is holding them together. And when they're out of position, obviously, not going to do so well. You can see here the Obsidian Guards, still 42 of them remaining. They've only lost about a third of their unit, and considering the amount of punishment they must have been taking from all of these elites, again, it goes to show how strong they are. Sons of Durin as well, swinging their mighty warhammers. Dane and Gimli doing their thing. I wonder if Gimli is... No. Well, there goes the Angmar General. Oh. Wonder if Gimli is still alive. Can we find him? There's 40 of them, so they have taken some losses, and Gimli's unit model traditionally is near the front, so it's highly possible that he has in fact perished. It's looking like it. Anyway, Dunedain Rangers sneaking their way in. They're going to set themselves up here and get themselves into the ideal firing position by the looks of things. Indeed they are. Go on then, Rangers, do your thing. They managed to get something of a volley off before the catapult crew gets into them. Obviously the Rangers will slaughter the catapult crew, but regardless. What's going on over here? Galatharim Nobles, only 7 of them remaining. 13 Sindar Archers. That was an interesting flourish that they've got going on. Is that how they parry? That's a really quick animation. Narrow Aru Sentinels actually did manage to get into the Ironfoot crossbows, and they're actually facing the wrong way as well, so the Umbar pikes will actually win this fight, you would imagine. Now the crossbows shift themselves around, and now they turn back the wrong way once more. That's real confusing. The trolls have done really well though. I think the trolls were definitely a big difference maker. With the lower manpower of the elves and basically the guaranteed damage that the trolls do. That definitely proved to be a very worthwhile pick indeed. But overall I don't think it's going to be enough. There are those Angmar halberds which are in reserve. Going to arrive on the scene far, far too late. And you can see the Dunedain Rangers are making a point of slaughtering them. Having to face off now against Dragon Slayers. And with the support of the Rangers, I think the halberds are probably going to rout. They are shaken after all. What's going on over here? Still a fight going on over here, right? Yes, the Ironfoot pikes pushing forward. There's still some Barrow Wights left alive, which were one of the first units to engage, and they're going to be one of the last to be destroyed. But the Balagai halberds alone, I don't think we'll be able to defeat this blob of dwarven infantry. So at this point,
Our noble allies have lost their leader. Without their general, they may lose heart.
there goes Haldia. The elves don't have much left to flee, so yes, and here we can see the death blow, the Blacklock Engineers, showing that the Witches are not the only extremely powerful ranged unit. And there's also the body-piercing arrows, not quite as impressive as the body-piercing bolts, but even so, it's going to be the end. The Witchround Blackguard actually standing up to it relatively well, all things considered, which shows how strong they are. Blacklock Engineers just going to kite backwards, avoiding the Naruna Aru Sentinels. Arrows just flying in. The Dragon Slayers actually did find themselves surrounded by the halberds, but it didn't matter. The dwarves obviously can fight their way out of such situations. And we've got going on. And yeah, obviously the attackers have pulled ahead. Routing crossbowmen, really this sort of pocket of resistance at this point is all that remains. Still some Obsidian Guard facing off in mortal combat against the Witchround Blackguard, with the support of some Sons of Durin and some Axe Guard, which are still alive actually. Only 5, but still. Well, the Naruna Aru Sentinels aren't going to be able to get into the Blacklock Engineers. The Blacklock Engineers, of course, fairly strong in melee. Really want a dedicated infantry unit, but they are multiple HP, I think. So they can, they can give it out in melee and hang with a pretty tough crowd. Meanwhile, those Dunedain Rangers making a point of shooting down some of those Witchround pikemen. But they're just being pursued by the Dragon Slayers, so they're not going to do all that well. Still fights all over the map really going on. You can see the Trolls have actually come to the aid of the Blackguard, which is going to give the at least localised victory to the defenders. And then over here, of course, the Balagai Halberds. A single unit Balagai Halberds was never going to be a match for all of these Ironfoot pikes. Slowly and surely. There's also some Ironfoot crossbowmen here. I love the little details on CARN DUM, like a little forge, fighting pit, tents. It's the details. There are the Naruna Aru Sentinels, some Angmar halberds as well. Although the end is nigh at this point. There is no way that the defenders will be able to dig their way out of this, and CARN DUM, the Witch King's humble abode, will fall. Blacklock Engineers still sort of just running around. They're not going to be able to get away from the Naruna Aru Sentinels. They may as well just stand and fight in melee at this point. Although there are some Witchround pikemen as well. The Blacklocks and the Dunedain Rangers just sort of running all over the place trying to kite. Having a look. Yeah, 5% differential. It's definitely been close. I mean, it wouldn't have taken... I think, honestly, if the defenders had organised themselves a little better, committed a little more readily to certain areas, I think they could have won this. The Witches were used really well. But there were certain other units which weren't, I must say. Stuff like the Naru and Aru Royal Guard would have been a real difference maker here in the late game. Castamir's Rangers as well. But as it is, victory is going to go to the attackers. Although the defenders were orcs, so maybe people... I don't know what people prefer. Defenders winning or good factions winning. I guess we'll find out. Blacklocks doing a lot of damage. And I think that's one player admitted defeat. Possibly the elves? Well, the Blacklock Engineers are just shredding those Naru and Aru Sentinels now. And another hit. Some of them still alive. For now. And they will get caught in melee. The Dragon Slayers, though, just mulching their way through these scattered units. The Trolls won't be so easy to bring down. There's also still a few Blackguard left alive. And a single Pikeman. There go the Trolls. Blacklocks proving themselves in melee a little bit. What's going on over there? The Catapult Crewmen. Dunedain Rangers chasing after them. The Benny Hill theme comes immediately to mind. Catapult Crew routing off. And I think that's just about it. They were just perpetually routing units in the town centre, so... yeah, that's going to be it. Sort of a mini Barad Dur here at the top. So as we sort of look down...
were slain and defeated on the field. But fate has been kind to us and delivered us victory.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Lothlorien had a bit of a rough time of it with only 747 kills, but then a lot of that does come down to the fact that a lot of their infantry was destroyed fairly quickly by the Witchers. Boptanta doing very well, obviously, the Witchers doing some heavy lifting there. The Dwarves getting the most kills, but that was because they held quite a lot of their force in reserve. I still like the way Froggy approached this match. But really, as the attackers, most of the time you need to be unified in your strategy, because I feel as though the defenders, if they had organised themselves a little better, could have punished the attackers for that. But we'll see. In the future, I'm sure there will be a good example of that happening. It almost happened here. Dragon Slayer is obviously doing very well into the late game. Not many units getting over 100 kills, I must say. Erebor Legionaries doing so, Ironfoot Warriors. So early on, the committals yielded a lot of results. But late on, obviously, the burden was shared out evenly, fairly among the Erebor army. So, I hope you enjoyed that. It's definitely good to see CARN DUM again. This is probably a better showing of CARN DUM than I've shown in the past. It definitely sort of showed the layers a little bit. And it's good to see new players, I think. I've seen Boptanta and Froggy before, and I think Jinx. But I don't think Lasso and Ranger's Apprentice, unless they've changed their names at some point in time. So yeah, thank you to Lasso for sending this one in. It was definitely quite enjoyable. And next, I think I will be showing a battle on Helm's Deep, if all goes well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for that.